I mean, look at me now. I'm inserting Bitcoin into a business school that has no content programming around Bitcoin, and nobody tells me no. In fact, my dean is excited that I'm bringing brand new content. You can create powerful synergies in a business that stacks Bitcoin and provides Bitcoin services to your customers, whether they're institutional customers or retail customers. And you can even leverage some of those tools that you have for your customers for your treasury business.
I live in Austria. I go to school in Austria, and I never heard about the Austrian Economics School of Thought. Like, how is that possible? I had to learn about Austrian economics with Bitcoin.
I actually love to be proven wrong, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners do. So I don't think it's just an ego test. I think it's a cognitive dissonance. I think our brains were trained from a young age because our schools teach us how the world works, and Bitcoin just challenges so many of the fundamental assumptions of how the world's supposed to work that it hurts your brain for a while until you get your mind around it all.
Hey Boyd, how are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
Great, Robin. Yeah, just got back a couple days ago from Amsterdam and back with the family, back to mountain biking. So life is good.
Absolutely. That's really, really cool. And we talked last time already about like Bitcoin and your journey, but I think for the few people that haven't seen your first episode with me and haven't seen all of the stuff that you are doing, maybe give us some background of what you're doing, what you have done, and a little bit of your journey to Bitcoin.
Sure. So I'm American, but I haven't lived in the US since 2001. In 2012, I moved to Argentina. That was my first exposure to living in a country where they implement currency controls and where, inflation is rampant and, where Bitcoin becomes really interesting for just survival. Of course, that was right after Bitcoin was born, and I wasn't exposed then, although I heard about it when I was in Argentina. And if you backtrack just a few years behind that, 10 years behind that, when I got my PhD, was the first time I got any exposure to Austrian economics, which in that experience, it was really around Joseph Schumpeter and his work around creative destruction and what entrepreneurs do in an economy. I observed the Occupy movement. My PhD's in business, and I have always assumed capitalism could be used as a means to address a lot of the ills in society, that it wasn't the root cause of anything until the Occupy movement. And I misdiagnosed what the underlying problem was. I thought the growing income inequality and the, growing unrest, the dispersion between those with and without, and I thought maybe all those people in the Occupy movement were right and I was wrong, and that we need to move towards a post-capitalist world to some other kind of economic model. And that's when I started looking at blockchain and crypto, not as an investment thesis. I wasn't investing. I was more interested intellectually and then later in building in the crypto space, like a decentralized world that could maybe disrupt these massive empires, the Mag 7s, etc., with more decentralized systems. And I got into that for a while. I looked at Bitcoin, but I didn't go deep into it. You'll probably recall from our previous conversation that my research and teaching background and my startup experiences have all been at the intersection of technology and sustainability. And one of the things that turned me off to Bitcoin initially was the whole FUD around the energy consumption, climate impacts of mining, which, obviously I was wrong about, but I think it's worth recognizing that the industry has transformed quite a bit, Bitcoin mining, from back when I was looking at it, which was around 2016, to today. Now it's one of the leading industries in the world in terms of figuring out how to optimize for renewables or stranded energy assets. So now, of course, it's a shining star. Fast forward, I started a company in crypto in Barcelona where I was living before. I got burnt out on that and I stepped down like 7 years later. We had, gotten to 30 people. We were growing. We had raised money, but we were struggling to find a way to scale the project more, and we pivoted to a second project, a product inside the company, and I thought that might help us, and that didn't really help either. And I lost my brother to brain cancer around that time, and it caused me to reflect, okay, what am I doing in the world? Am I doing the most optimal thing for me and for humanity and for the planet? And I just didn't think I was. So I stepped back, and then I took a job in Mexico at the leading business school in Latin America called Agares, part of Tec de Monterrey. And it gave me some time for reflection. And I started going back to first principles, and I just rediscovered Bitcoin and got deeper and deeper into it till I couldn't get out of the rabbit hole anymore. And I wrote a book about Bitcoin called Bitcoin Singularity. Back in May, it was published. And somewhere around the end of last year, I concluded that by the end of this year, I needed to be working full time in Bitcoin. So I've been in the transition period. I've been inserting education around Bitcoin into the MBA and the business school, the executive education programs. We're one of the only business schools in the world that's teaching Bitcoin content right now. I'm developing a Bitcoin executive education program for the spring of next year for finance and other execs in the country. And the big one is I joined a company that was called Capital X. It's now called Arcadia B. And we are scaling the underlying Bitcoin services business, which has been operating since 2017. And we're also inserting an aggressive treasury strategy as well. So we're the longest running Bitcoin services business in Mexico and the first treasury business in Mexico.
That's fun. I love that. And I want to come later on the treasury companies. I think we have a streak of now three sequential episodes where we talk about treasury companies, which is kind of fun because it didn't happen before. But maybe just briefly to the book for the few people that haven't seen the first episode. What is kind of the book about, the Bitcoin Singularity, and what is kind of the thesis behind that?
So Bitcoin Singularity is really a personal reflection going deeper into leveraging my background in sustainability and how business can transform the economy and the world through innovation and technology. I kept hearing when I was going down the rabbit hole that you fix the money, you fix the world. And like everyone says it, but then like almost all the thought leadership and the books are about macro, they're about money, they're about, the history of money. You look at some of the best books in the space that everyone quotes, whether it's Seyfedin's or Larry Lepard's or Lynn Alden's, Jeff Booth. They're all really about the first part. If you ask me, at least that's how I treat it in the book. So the first chapter's on fiat and what it does to society. And I cite these great authors and say, hey, you want to go deeper on this topic? There's all these great books that are written entirely on this topic alone. What's wrong with fiat and why we need sound money? Then the second chapter is basically a synopsis of Jeff Booth's thesis around, deflation and why that's actually good for society. And then the rest of it is all about my take on how Bitcoin could change the world over a several decade period, with my own sort of futurist take on when these stages will happen. So I basically say that we're in the Bitcoinization stage, which is early adopters, whether that's people like you and I or companies or governments, but just, handful. Early adopters starting to demonstrate there's some product market fit. And then that I argue that after 2030, we start moving into hyper Bitcoinization, which is just more wide scale adoption, more acceptance in more places. Not the majority, but we cross the chasm from the early adopters to the early majority. And then I talk about Bitcoin Singularity is like an ultimate destination, probably starting around 2045, 2050, where we start to see the values of Bitcoin, the cypherpunk values, the low time preference be ubiquitous in society. We see hopefully the disappearance of war, etc. So I walk through what I think is going to be the evolution of this if things go well. I also talk about the intersection with AI the convergence with AI, and kind of where I think humanity can go. And I touch on things like I have chapters on housing, repricing housing. I have chapters on consumerism and how, with a low tide preference, society will see less waste and go into the landfill and more quality products being developed. Chapter on environment, on energy, and how Bitcoin mining is accelerating sustainable energy adoption, etc., and stranded energy use. So basically, looking at the broader societal effects of a multi-decade transition to sound money on a Bitcoin standard.
I love that. And it's also interesting because when you think about where we are in this Bitcoin journey, I think we kind of don't get how freakingly early we still are in this journey. And we think about the signs that mainstream is slowly coming, that we're crossing the chasm, that like the Bitcoin culture is already so distributed. It just means that we are really big already. But at the same time, the thing that Bitcoin really wants to achieve is so much bigger. So we're so early to the Bitcoin journey. We just already reached a lot because Bitcoin's journey will be a very long and very big one. So there's this two different kind of angles that you always have to see, that Bitcoin is already huge, but at the same time, we're super early to that story, which is kind of hard to explain, where we are early, but we are already kind of good. But like nation states that we're talking about, it, treasury companies, they are like it's kind of funny to have that moment in time where we both are like big and early at the same time.
Something you just said triggered a thought in me. Like, I think when you look back at other cycles of disruptive innovations and the adoption curves, there are metrics you could look at around Bitcoin adoption and say we've already crossed the chasm based on, depending on what data you use, is 40 million, 100 million, how many people have some Bitcoin, and, number of businesses accepting Bitcoin, price of Bitcoin, and how it's, while we're all upset about the current state of it, or at least a lot of people are, if you look at where it came from, it's also showing product market fit. So like, if you look at any specific criteria around what it means for an innovation across the chasm, you could maybe make a claim that Bitcoin already has done it, but I would absolutely say it hasn't. But I think now that I think about why would I say it hasn't, is something you just said in a way, which is like the holistic view of what Bitcoin could do for humanity and society is so broad, is so far reaching, that you can't evaluate Bitcoin on one criteria of adoption to say we've crossed the chasm, because to cross the chasm, we'd have to achieve a lot of those things I articulate in the book at a scale that shows we're reaching early majority already. So that means that, we've transformed the energy system, not worldwide, but in hundreds of countries in a meaningful way, not just because there's one or two Bitcoin mining operations in that country. That's not enough. Like, we'd have to have a meaningful impact on that. We'd have to have a meaningful impact on consumption. We'd have to have a meaningful impact on real estate prices. And we don't yet at scale have that impact from Bitcoin. We're seeing like pockets of it in different markets around the world. But for the big, like, capital B thesis of Bitcoin changing the world, we're not there yet, because we need to get to scale on all of those things, not just in one part of it. It's not like, compared to other technologies, it's not enough that somebody just bought a little Bitcoin and that means they count as participants in crossing the chasm. It's not enough. We need to see the collective impact of Bitcoin on a broad enough stage to say we've crossed it, and we're not there yet.
Yeah, and also I had the panel with like we are early in Amsterdam, and so I looked up some past inventions or past discoveries, and I actually saw that it's almost a rule. It's almost like normal for something very disruptive to be misunderstood the first couple of years, and sometimes even decades, sometimes even more than decades, because it's disruptive to the current state, and the current state was understood by the mainstream. And if it And it actually, if it isn't misunderstood, it means it's actually not that big of a deal. If it doesn't completely challenge the status quo and then therefore being misunderstood by the mainstream, it is not big enough of a huge impact. And I find it interesting to look at past inventions almost as a prediction that Bitcoin has to be misunderstood. Otherwise, it's not big enough of an disruption to the financial service, because it's like completely something else. I don't know how you look at that, but like I find it really interesting to stumble upon that. And then we kind of think, how many people still misunderstand Bitcoin? It's like 99% of people on earth, they still think it's like a scam, or it's a small investment, or it's like something like that. It's like, I still hear tulip mania. Like it's crazy that thought is still out there after 16 years of showing that it is not tulip mania. Like, it's crazy for me.
So I think about these topics a lot because, as I mentioned earlier, I've found a way to insert Bitcoin into classes at a major business school and into executive education programs. This would have been maybe 2 months ago. Maybe I did a 4-hour executive ed discussion. There in this group, there were 15 executives from different companies, and the topic was basically how exponential technologies are converging to transform our journey towards a more sustainable economy. And obviously, naturally, I injected Bitcoin into this discussion. And the intention, not because, if I could control it entirely, every minute of every day I'm teaching or doing education or building, it would always be in Bitcoin. But I didn't mention this before, but I have stepped down from my full-time role at the university. Now I'm moving on January 1. I'm just going to be like an affiliate faculty as opposed to full-time, which I was until now. But in this interim step, I'm teaching courses that aren't just about Bitcoin. And so my plan was to only talk 10 minutes about Bitcoin. And the students the executives had not enough information about Bitcoin, but I piqued their interest and like, wait, we can't go on to the next subject. We got to go deeper. So we went deeper and went like whole open discussion about like why Bitcoin is scarce compared to other assets, and all these questions. And they started asking about, well, how do you buy it and all these other things. And then at the end, one of the students who was really engaged, he raised his hand. He said, okay, hey, professor, I have a question for you. If Bitcoin is everything you say it is, why is it no one in this room owns any Bitcoin and none of us have ever heard about it before? We've never talked about it in any of our professional lives or anything, and we're all executives and companies. I said, well, I'm going to turn the question around on you. How many of you have an undergraduate degree? 100% raise their hand. How many of you have a master's degree? 1/3 of them raise their hand. So like 5 or 6 maybe. For how many of you is the first time you've ever been in a classroom where any professor even mentioned the word Bitcoin? And that was 100% of them. I said, that's your answer right there. I said, our education system from primary school, high school, university, is failing our society because we're not educating students about sound money, about Keynesian, about Austrian economics, and people go into the world with these assumptions that the world is always operated the way it does now, and our economies work the way it does, and that some inflation is good, and all these things that we all know in the Bitcoin community. But we think everyone should know these things, and most people have been exposed to them, but they haven't. And so the issue with Bitcoin for so many people is it challenges so many of our fundamental assumptions around how the world works, how the economy works, our place in the world. And, I think you've even used the word, because a lot of people do. It's a very common expression, and it's like an ego test, Bitcoin. I actually don't think it's so much ego for most people. I think it's like, if you've heard the word cognitive dissonance, this idea where like your brain has been wired a certain way. I mean, we're practically almost genetically wired now, for at least the younger generation, like your age and younger, might even be almost genetically wired to think the world works the way it does. Because it's been working that way since at least 1971. And some history from before then. And so to grok Bitcoin means you have to challenge all your fundamental assumptions. This isn't just about, oh, I thought Bitcoin was a scam before, and now I have to accept I was wrong about it. That's not it. I mean, maybe for some people, especially some who are like super fragile egos or like very prideful and they think they're always right. I actually love to be proven wrong. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners do. Um, so I don't think it's just an ego test. I think it's a cognitive dissonance. I think our brains were trained from a young age because our schools teach us how the world works. And Bitcoin just challenges so many of the fundamental assumptions of how the world's supposed to work that it hurts your brain for a while until you get your mind around it all.
So interesting. Do you actually know when exactly 1971, like what month it was? I currently
I don't know that. That's interesting.
Because I just wanted to make that comparison because my father was born in 1971. Gold, Nix. Maybe I can quickly read it out. Like, what date was that?
I had in my head October, but I'm probably way wrong. I don't know why I'm thinking October.
You're not that wrong. It's August 15, 1971. Oh, okay. I couldn't remember that. And so I just like 5 months after my dad was born, 1971 happened. so the Nixon shock. And so when you think about even me, I grew up in a world not only where fiat money was always normal, but even from my dad's and my parents' side, fiat was always normal. They lived up in fiat. So like I didn't had a direct exposure to the gold standard. I always was in the fiat world, and my parents were always in the fiat world.
Exactly.
So like our brain is wired exactly like that. And it's really hard to get out of that. I remember that when I first listened to Bitcoiners like Cypher or Seyr, when I came into the space in 2020, I heard Austrian economics all the time. And I was wondering, like, why are they talking about Austria? And then I figured out, oh, there's Austrian economics. Why did I never heard about that? I live in Austria. I go to school in Austria, and I never heard about the Austrian Economics School of Thought. Like, how is that possible? And so it almost annoys me that I had to learn about Austrian economics with Bitcoin, and I didn't learn it already beforehand. And it is such a bad topic in school also. So I just wanted to bring it up because, as you said, many people, most people probably on Earth already lived in a full fiat standard world. Like everyone that is younger than, 54 years old now, they all started their life in a fiat world. And even the people that are like 60 years old, they had like 5 years in a non-fiat standard. And even before,
I was born in 1970, so I was born like in October. So I was born like 10 months before we went off the gold standard.
That's close. You had some, but even beforehand, this was not a full gold standard. Like it is, there was already some kind of fiat standard there. It was just like the official date is 1971 in August. But if you are honest, like already beforehand, it was no longer like a hard or sound money standard.
One more comment on that you referenced around like, the flaws of, economics or of education, that even in Austria, you weren't taught about Austrian economics, which is, really ironic and crazy. You learned about Austrian economics from Americans and from people outside your country, even though the birth of smart economics was in your own country and it wasn't taught. But, a lot of, I think it's common in Bitcoin because we're skeptical of everything. I think there's so much sort of conspiracy theories that get moved around. And one of the conspiracy theories I disagree with is that there's this like suppression of discussions around Austrian economics in education because the universities have too much vested interest in Keynesian because of how they get funded and everything. I honestly think that's total BS. I really do. And the reason I think it's BS is because I got my PhD at the University of Colorado in 2001. That's where I did get some exposure to Austrian economics in Joseph Schumpeter. I've had an unusual career of being half my time in the academic world and half my time in the business world, building startups and technology companies, etc. Not once, ever have I been constrained in pursuing research and teaching topics that I care about. I mean, look at me now. I'm inserting Bitcoin into a business school that has no content programming around Bitcoin, and nobody tells me no. In fact, my dean is excited that I'm bringing brand new content to our business school, and it's kind of, getting some media attention for the institution and everything because it's, a new topic that isn't being covered anywhere else. So I don't think academia has a very strong, this goes back like hundreds of years, this academic freedom, this idea that professors should have very liberal rights to explore their intellectual curiosity without being constrained by institutional barriers of any kind, because that's how knowledge is built and we grow as a society. And if anywhere in the world is supposed to be free from influence from, money, people, or governments, is supposed to be the university. Now, it's not 100% always that way, as we know, we've seen. But generally speaking, my colleagues around the world, I've been a professor at like 10 universities now in probably 6 countries or something. Never seen, never witnessed it, never experienced anybody trying to control anybody's research. So it's not that, it's the same problem that we just discussed. People forget professors are people too. And where did professors get their knowledge from? The same places we did. They went to primary school, they went to high school, they went to universities. Well, if none of my students I talked to have ever been exposed to Austrian economics, you weren't exposed to it in your own universities, then it's just that people aren't exposed to this, and Bitcoin and the underlying first principles behind it just are not kind of commonly understood by society, including by faculty. So it's a problem. It's a fundamental problem, and Bitcoiners are going to have to change it because, the average faculty member that I interact with has no idea about these things either. None. They've been in academics for decades, in business schools, etc., and they don't understand this stuff either. So we got a lot of work ahead of us.
I 100% agree. And I think it is a systemic problem. I don't know, but I have a strong belief that there isn't a very dark power in education or like all of those things that kind of control all the things. And of course, they're like people that control like what's getting into the agenda, like what is teach. Like there's like a table that you are supposed to teach kids. It depends on like, are you in a university or school or like kindergarten? Like there's like books for that. There's like a plan for that. All of that is like very clear. But I don't think there's like a very devious kind of problem. It's more a systemic problem with that. It's also Jeff Booth always mentions that we cannot fix the system within the system. We have to find a new system, and Bitcoin is a new system. And then we can build on top of that. We will never be able to heal the things, the systemic structures that kind of got lost in the years, in the decades, and almost like in the hundreds of years before us already. So I don't know. I'm very cautious with all the conspiracy theories within the Bitcoin community. There are a lot of them where I can say maybe, but I don't have any proof of that. And if I don't have any proof of that, why would I talk about that? Like it's you're seeing a few puzzle pieces that might fit, but you haven't seen the full picture, and you're drawing a conclusion based on a not done puzzle piece. And then you kind of like really, really heavy on that, and you're dying on that hill. And I'm like, I don't know. They probably are not fully right, probably also not fully wrong. So like just keep it as it is and focus on Bitcoin. So there are a lot of fun ones out there. I tend to not engage or even be interested in them because most of them don't make sense. And like even if they are true, you also always have to ask yourself, what is the impact those have on my life? Does it even have an impact? And if it has an impact, can it do something against that? And can it do something against that anyways, even if I believe it or not? So if, for example, if we talk about food, are they poison our food? Depends on how you define poison. Like we have like really bad processed food and that is really bad for our body. It's not really poisoned, but it's very bad for your body. Will it affect you? Yes. If you eat junk food all day long, it will definitely affect you. But it doesn't mean there's a conspiracy that wants to make people fat and ugly. It might just be that the financial incentives are aligned in that way. And so I don't know. I tend to just be very pragmatic and say like, yeah, there's poison in the food, so I just don't eat that food that is kind of sugar and fully processed and like all of that. So like, just don't eat it. Buy quality food and eat the quality food. Like that, it's a very easy. Like you don't have to be conspiracy theorist for that.
No, I agree.
Yeah, really interesting. I wanted to bring something up that you sent me, I think, yesterday. We're also coming here to the topic of longevity. Then it was a nice transition, actually. You sent me this sustainable abundance triad. Can you explain like what it is and like how it came to your thoughts?
So yeah, it's been a process that has probably, it's probably in my head a multi-decade process, but like practically it's been at least for the last 4 or 5 years, these different themes running around my head and researching and teaching and building in related areas. So, and it kind of came to a culmination. As you know, I'm an avid mountain biker, and I got back from Bitcoin Amsterdam and rode on Saturday and Sunday and listening to podcasts, including a few of yours and Jordy Visser, who it's like religion for me to listen to his pod with Pompliano on Saturday. They release a new one, and Pompliano and Jordy always talk about the convergence of AI and Bitcoin and macro. And he was talking also, Jordy was, about some topics around longevity. And another inspiration for me in my intellectual pursuits over the last maybe 5 years has been Peter Diamandis, who, among other things, tried to tackle the issue you and I were just talking about around education. He founded Singularity University as a way to sort of disrupt the way universities teach and educate and research in more holistic, interdisciplinary ways to sort of help educate people on where the future of the world is going and the role of exponential technologies. And Peter Diamandis has been talking about longevity on his pod called Moonshots for many years now, and is a great pod as well. And so it's been all these things, the podcast, reading, 2 of my books. So my second to last book was called Abundance Capitalism, and my last book was called Bitcoin Singularity. And when you blend all these things I'm telling you about, what I've come to conclude, at least it's a thesis I have now, is that there are these 3 massive technologies, trends, transformations that can be thought about independently, but also more interestingly in the convergence of them. So it's Bitcoin, which everyone on this pod knows very well, AI, which all of us are exposed to now, and longevity. And so I call it the sustainable abundance triad. This is also inspired by some of the work of Elon Musk. Some people hate him, some love him, whatever. I'm kind of like you. I'm pragmatic. I look for cues in the environment around us. I take from it what I want. And if there's things I don't like about it, I don't have to internalize that, whether that's a person or a theory or whatever. But, Elon Musk now with Tesla and what he's building in and outside of Tesla, he has now started to refer to this as sustainable abundance. So I started thinking about exactly what sustainable abundance means to me. And I concluded that it's this kind of triad thing, that if we have sound money on Bitcoin, we have ubiquitous AI that is aligned. So we avoid the worst parts of AI that people worry about with respect to it, like controlling humans and everything. And then we have longevity, which, as you said earlier, is not just about expanding the number of years we live on Earth, but also expanding the quality of life while we're on Earth. And if you go back to when we first started talking, and I mentioned the sort of journey I had into Bitcoin, and that started with, in part, when I lost my brother to brain cancer, I've had more and more reflections on the role of technology, exponential technologies in accelerating health for people, eradicating disease. And again, Peter Diamandis has been influential in my thinking, not just him by himself, but on his pod, he interviews some of the most experts in the world in topics related to biotech and abundance and longevity in a more holistic way. He's also founded companies in the longevity space. And when you think about these three together, Bitcoin, AI, and longevity, for me, these basically represent the building blocks for transforming our world towards sustainable abundance that is inclusive and builds prosperity for everyone. So when you start, each one of these independently is pretty transformative, but when you start thinking about how each one interacts with the other, it's crazy. Like longevity and Bitcoin. Okay, what's the relationship there? Well, for one thing, if you are building out your portfolio, you're building it in context of how long you think you will live and how many years do I need to have access to this capital so I can live the life I want. Well, what if it's increasingly credible that the average person not hit by a bus is going to be able to live to 100 or much longer than that? Peter Diamandis talks with people deep in the longevity space who believe very seriously that between 2030 and 2035, we could reach what they call longevity escape velocity. And what that means is, I know this is hard to believe. And even when I bring it up in classes, I'm like, look, I'm not sure we're going to be there in 5 or 10 years. But here's the theory, that the convergence of exponential technologies like nanotechnology, biotech, AI are going to allow us to cure cancer by 2030 to 2035 and turn it from a fatal disease to a chronic one that can just be managed and you can live indefinitely on it. And the theory behind longevity escape velocity is that at some point, as long as you don't get hit by a bus or do something stupid that causes you to be killed in a normal way, you could technically expand your lifespan by 1 year for every year you live on Earth, which I know it's crazy and hard to believe, but the theory is that there could be a path where you could basically live indefinitely. And we could debate this a lot more, and no one's going to agree exactly on the date when this could happen or if it's even possible. But directionally, it's right. Directionally, we are on path to transforming how cancer kills people. We're on path to cure many diseases. We're on path to have AI be able to conduct millions of simulations so that we could figure out the optimal treatment path for a particular human being based on their DNA and their current health issues that they have. One of my best friends, I just found out when I was in Amsterdam, same age as me, was born the same week as me, has Parkinson's. And I'm only 55, and that's normally a disease thought of for older people. And he's a very smart guy, and it hit me hard. And so again, all these people around me that I'm exposed to, my brother and everything, makes me really sort of dial in on this. And as you said, it's not just about thinking about living more years. It's about improving the quality of life while you live on Earth. So the combination of Bitcoin and longevity is really interesting. Longevity in AI. Obviously, I just gave the one obvious example that AI is going to be the underlying foundational technology that transforms how long and how well we live on planet Earth. AI and Bitcoin. I have a whole chapter on that in my book. This is something that people keep talking about. It's come up in your pod as well. Things like, well, what will AI agents use to conduct transactions and to store value? They're certainly not going to use fiat, and they don't have a way to do KYC and have bank accounts. So they're clearly going to be doing things in a digital way in terms of transactions. So all these interactions of these three fundamental building blocks of the future of humanity, I believe, as does Elon Musk and Jordi Visser and many other people, the convergence of these three things could allow us to live dozens of years or more longer than we do today in a healthier way, could allow us to extend our purchasing power and have intergenerational wealth passed on to our children, can help us have abundant access to things like food, energy, water, because as AI converges with these other technologies, we're able to basically produce at an unbelievable scale at an extremely low cost, to the point where people like Elon Musk believe in the next 10 years or so, we'll get to a point where we will have virtually free products because they won't be scarce. Some of the raw materials may be scarce, but of course, with AI and other tools, we'll be able to optimize waste materials and bring them back into the input flow into new products. And when machines are building everything, when machines and robots are operating on people, when machines are building their own selves, they're replicating themselves. So Optimus robots are building more Optimus robots. You basically can envision a path of abundance. We have abundant water on planet Earth. We have abundant energy in form of renewable. We're increasing our capability to produce these at scale so that we can have unlimited energy and water and food for everyone. So this is like a very optimist, techno optimist, futuristic view of the world that I'm very excited about.
I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use simplemining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. And it's really interesting because I thought about those three things. Like, if you ask me what kind of a thing I'm really interested in outside of Bitcoin, obviously Bitcoin is very dominating in my life. It's AI. I use it every single day. I research every single day what is the best tool. I just today was comparing Gemini and ChatGPT, like what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages. I also love Grok. I love Claude, Perplexity. Like there's a lot of different tools out there now. And you cannot use them all. You're really benefiting from the context of what the AI has. So like, doubling down on one is actually really good for you, if you want to get the most out of an AI. And then the longevity thing. I experiment so much with my diet, from plant-based to carnivore to eating no sugar. I think you mentioned it before. I now started first week with completely no sugar. I mean, completely no sugar doesn't, like, it's not true. Like, for example, I still eat bread, very few of it, but like here and there, I eat a croissant also at the, like a bread, thing at the Bitcoin Amsterdam one. I mean, even in lentils, there's sugar in there. So like, no sweets and no added sugar and no sugary drinks. I only drink water with like lime in it, or water without anything in it, which water with lime, like that's really nice. Like I discovered that like 2 days ago. But anyways, those three topics are really interesting, kind of bringing them together, because it almost a little bit like, 1997, or I don't know when when did the Sovereign Individual came out?
I think it was 1990 something.
Individual, yeah, it was something around that. I just want to, 1997. So it's a year older than me, the book. And so having that book really gave a nice overview of where I think the individual, and the transition to information age is going. And I feel like there's a new thing when we combine now AI and longevity and Bitcoin together, now that we have those technologies, almost like a second part to that book, or like a follow-up to that book. There could be something really interesting in there, the comparison, or the triangle between those three things. And yeah, I'm writing, like just for my own notes on those three topics a lot, mostly on Bitcoin. And I'm glad you brought it up, because AI is a huge topic for me. Bitcoin is a huge topic for me, and longevity is a huge topic for me, but I barely talk about it on the podcast, because it's like, it's not that interrelated. It's really related, but like not as close as AI and Bitcoin, as they have a really clear connection. But food and longevity and like all those things, like that's freaking interesting.
Yeah, so I agree. And I think longevity is rarely discussed in the Bitcoin community, but I think it should be. I think these three elements interact with each other, Bitcoin, AI, and longevity, in very powerful ways. And I think as longevity becomes more apparent to more people, like it, just like we've talked about, like the number of people in the world who grok Bitcoin and understand what it is and how transformative it is, and therefore are trying to live on a Bitcoin standard and all that stuff, we know is very small. Well, there's the same kind of small population of very thoughtful, very smart people in the longevity space that are building solutions that will allow people to live longer, just like the Bitcoin community is building money systems that will allow money to live in perpetuity in a sound way and everything else. And these two communities rarely interact with each other, but actually fundamentally they're built on first principles that interact in very powerful ways. And the more Bitcoin gets ubiquitous, the more longevity becomes even more intriguing, because if we look at a world where work the way we know it is becoming less important, in terms of you have to go work Monday to Friday to make money so you can survive and you pay for your bills for your family. If we're moving to a world that's driven by AI, where there's going to be robots doing all the work and humans not doing much work that is paid in a normal way, then how are humans who can live way longer because of AI and other technologies, how are they going to economically survive long term? Well, some people are arguing about universal basic income, UBI. Some are saying that we'll just be able to follow our highest and best purpose in life and achieve self-actualization. And, just like if we like to paint, we can just paint and not worry about money, whatever. But there could be a very critical role of having sound money. And if we're right about where Bitcoin will eventually go in terms of its purchasing power, and somebody acquiring 0.01 Bitcoin today, what is that worth? If they're 20 years old, but they're going to live to be 120 years old, what does that 0.01 Bitcoin buy for them in terms of purchasing power 100 years from now? Or can they even pass some of it on to their children? I'm not prepared to say what Bitcoin's going to be worth in the next couple of years. Who knows? I have my own theories on that. But like long term, Bitcoin has no top because fiat has no bottom. We know that. So these things have to interact with each other. They're not mutually independent, even though each one can have their own field, career, specialist, podcast, whatever. But the real world is messier than that. And there's convergence of all kinds of things happening simultaneously. The world is a meta system of systems. Cities are the same. And so I think these three things, Bitcoin, AI, and longevity, are going to transform humanity in such powerful ways, and that we should be talking about them more collectively instead of independently.
I 100% agree with that. Like, absolutely. I'm getting excited about having a longer, better life. And I think it's also really important when we talk about longevity, and you said it before, but I really want to hammer down on that. It's not just that I want to live longer. More importantly, those years that I live, I want to live the best I can. I want to be able to have a clear mind, a strong body, great relationships, and all of those are way easier if you take care of your body today. If you take care of your body today, next year already is 10x better, and the year after is 100x better from today. And so it's not just about living long, because we could be hit by a bus and like all those things. But if you actually take care of yourself, you live better tomorrow. Like tomorrow, your body already starts to heal if you take longevity serious. And I think this is for me, the better message to people, not that like, oh, you can live forever. And then people say like, oh, I don't want to live forever. Like, it's bad to live forever. God didn't intend it to do it. Like all those like things. And they're just getting cut out if you just say, I want to live better right now. No matter if I live to 40, 50, or 250 years old.
So I agree with you. And I think there's an extra component to this discussion where longevity really comes in. So you talked about your own autonomy to make decisions around what you consume and how you live that are ways that can extend the quality of life you have. 100% agree. But another thing that I've heard it on Bitcoin podcasts when people interview doctors, for example, who are Bitcoiners, they talk about like the fundamental problems in our healthcare system. I have spent some good time on this pod talking about the problems with education, but healthcare is the same thing. It's been broken forever. And I think a lot of doctors are not, they're not evil. They have very, they get into medicine for very, good reasons. They want to help people. They want to help, improve people's quality of life and all these things. But the system itself, the way the incentives are aligned, the way that doctors are educated, the way we insure people for getting treated on things, is that it tends to be very reactive. So our healthcare system is like, oh, I have a problem, I have to go to the hospital or a clinic and they have to treat it. But just like you said, there's, personal will here in terms of how you treat your body that you control. There are things that you may not control. There's debates around that, like exposure to cancer. Do we sometimes control that? Like even my brother who died of brain cancer, some people believe that GBM, which is what my brother had, glioblastoma, is a cancer that is exacerbated by people who are in high stress jobs and they take a lot of stress in, and that stress is like a chemical reaction that makes things worse. I don't think there's any data to prove that's true or not, but in general, you could argue a lot of diseases are probably not self-induced. They are exposure to things in our environment, chemicals, contamination, or they're genetic. And where I'm going with this is some of the things we can do to control our longevity, at least in terms of as you're talking about defining it as quality of life on Earth, not necessarily extending the years of life on Earth. Some of those are totally controllable by us. Some are not. So like a lot of cancers, you can't control directly whether you have cancer or not. But where we're going with longevity is that we can also do preventative mitigating activities from a medical perspective that can do the same thing as choosing a better diet in terms of preventing future disease, future illness. And, I'll give you an example that's emerging right now that the experts in AI and cancer are saying between 2030 and 2035. And I mentioned this briefly, but I didn't explain it, that we are going to be able to move from cancer being fatal to cancer being a chronic disease that's treatable for your whole life and doesn't affect your life long term, and even potentially prevent it from ever happening. So there's some trials right now. I'm not deep in this technology, but there are trials right now where they're injecting some kind of nanoparticles into your blood supply. These nanoparticles basically circulate around your blood and they can detect precancerous cells before they're cancerous, and then ways to treat those cells to convert them to healthy cells so that they never form cancer in your body. So what does that do for society? I mean, think about the ripple effects of that on healthcare costs, on quality of life, on losing people years before they should have, on family survivability, and all these other things that happen when we lose people to cancer, like I lost my brother, etc., or my friend who just got Parkinson's. Like he's very into technology and innovation. He's got a very open mind. He's been this way his whole life. That's why we became friends a while ago. And he and I are like sharing information now about what we're discovering around how AI is now being used in trials to actually address some of these diseases. And he and I are both, optimists that, his Parkinson's will be able to be treated to an extent that he will just have a chronic condition his whole life, but it won't deteriorate and he'll be able to live a long, healthy life. So my point is with longevity, you're right that part of it is what you control, and part of it is the advances in science with AI that are going to allow us to do, like they are already doing this now. Like you take the individual's DNA, you take a diagnosis of their illness they have or the symptoms they're showing that could lead to an illness like cancer, and you can basically run it through a system that can run like millions of simulations simultaneously and say, if we combine these forms of treatment, this vaccine with this injection, with this healthcare regimen regarding food and diet and lifestyle, which is the most optimal for this individual to actually extend their life the longest. And we're already getting there. So it's just unbelievable where we could go as society. And I'm like you, I personally am not, I think a lot of wealthy people are really interested in longevity to explore how they could live to be 200 or more years old. I don't have that like inner desire to extend my life 100 years. But I think living to 100 and being healthy all the way till the end sounds like a really nice, nice outcome.
Yeah, even if you think about, if you have the choice of having 20 healthy life years left or having 40 or 30 years left, but they are plagued by illnesses and chronic disease and all of those things. I rather choose the 20 healthy lives than like the 30 unhealthy lives, because like, but it gets complicated because like why outside of like a bus driving over you, why would you live short if you live healthier? So like in most cases you get more years and less diseases. But I still get, there's this interesting thing where we might get to a point, as you mentioned, that we have no longer diseases that are really bad. You have a disease, we can cure it, and it's fine. Like you go on with your life. And then it's just a matter of like, if you live healthier, you are just living better. And if you're living unhealthier, you can also live long, but it's just like not that good of a life, not that strong of a life. And I sometimes feel like with Bitcoin bringing financial abundance, with AI and robotics bringing abundance in productivity, and then in longevity bringing abundance in health and like longevity itself. Are we producing a lot of people that just play video games all day long? Like if they don't have financial needs, if they don't need to care for their health too much, and if the robots can do all the work, I fear for that a little bit.
I think it's an awesome question because I hadn't had this sustainable abundance triad yet articulated till I was on my mountain bike just in the last couple of days. It finally kind of all landed, but I've been testing the underlying fundamentals of this with people in the last several years, actually. And in a conversation not that long ago, the same question came to me from somebody, I can't remember who it was. And they said, all right, if all these things do come to fruition, then what are people going to do to keep themselves busy if they don't even need to work for money and they're living indefinitely and all these things? And, you know, my first reaction, because I'm an optimist by nature, was to say that most people will move towards what we, you know, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you've seen that, it's a pyramid that talks about like people need their basic needs met. And once they get up the food chain, eventually they get to self-actualization, which is basically like this almost spirit, depends on how you view it, but I think of it as like a spiritual awakening where I am achieving the highest and best purpose I can in my life, doing the thing that I'm best out and gives me the most pride and challenge and everything else. But like, I think probably 90% of Bitcoiners probably would do the same thing. But the person I was speaking to brought up the same question you did, and I don't have a good answer for that, which is like, there is a percentage of the population that by default would choose a lazy option if it's given to them and they can have enough food and energy and they don't have to work anymore. They don't have to push themselves anymore. They don't have the intellectual stimulation in their lives. They don't need it. They're happy just wasting away doing nothing. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be survival of the fittest, and some other way they end up not surviving as long, or if society shuns them in some way, and so they're kind of on the outside.
They're not having sex.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good example. So at least their version of the species will. I honestly think that would likely happen in some form or another. It's like how it's what happens in the evolution of nature, right? Like the best, the strongest emerge and grow, and the ones that don't disappear. And you know, somehow those lazy people, they're probably going to get fat, even if we have good longevity solutions. They're not designed for people who are not taking care of themselves at all, right? So probably it'll work itself out, or there might be like dozens of years or decades or 100 years while some of those people are still around. But can you imagine humanity if we achieve our highest objectives around AI and Bitcoin and longevity, and basically through survival of the fittest, like eventually you basically have a new breed of humans that are smarter, They have unlimited tools. They have abundance of food and energy. They're exploring other planets. They're doing some things at amazing scale. Now, of course, where this gets also interesting is what happens, this sort of hybrid human robot, which is absolutely going to be part of this future. When humans decide and the costs become more accessible, even more so with Bitcoin, that you can voluntarily choose to like have your right arm removed and replace it with a robotic one, because now your arm works just fine as it is, but a robotic one gives you like 100 times the strength, and you can do all kinds of things you couldn't have done before. Or you insert neural links of some kind, and your brain is more connected to AI, and you can, like, the universe is further expanding. It's hard to picture where we're going to end up going, but it's going to be some crazy place that is not what we're used to thinking of what it means to be a human on planet Earth today.
It will be extremely fun to live on planet Earth, and it is already. And I say that I say that sometimes it's, if you think about all the things that are going on in the world, you always have to remind yourself what a crazy good time it is to be alive right now, with Bitcoin getting into the world, with AI getting into the world, with longevity kind of going off. I think the world is only getting better from here on out. And I see and hear a lot of those Bitcoiners saying it gets worse, and like fiat monetary thing. Like, yes, fiat sucks. But if you see outside of the fiat system, world actually gets really good. Like medicine, like surgeries, all of those things, productivity. The only reason we don't have sky high inflation every single month is productivity and technology advancements. And so if you look at that way, you can already adopt the Bitcoin standard. So you've solved for the fiat problem already today, and you can live a healthy and sustainable and productive life with the technology at your disposal. Like, how crazy good is that? And so I would just encourage people to acknowledge how good the life we live is right now. And yeah, just enjoy it. Like, it's really great.
And the potential for the future. We've never seen in the history of humanity so many exponential technologies converging at the same time. Like, we had, I don't know, internet, and that took a couple decades to get to adoption. We had cell phones, same thing. Computers, same thing. Go back further in time, cars, all these things that became exponential over decades. We now have multiple converging exponential technologies at the same time that are around these major topics of money, like Bitcoin, AI, longevity, and the underlying tech behind longevity is AI, biotech, nanotech, all these things converging at the same time and accelerating at an accelerated pace. And the future is definitely bright.
100%. And now one last topic I want to get to is you moving to Argentina, and how Argentina is kind of doing with now the first 2 years of Javier Milei. I think Javier Milei was a big news 2 years ago. And maybe I was like, why you moved there, and how it's going for you.
So I lived in Argentina before in 2012 and 13. I left when they implemented currency controls, and I moved to Mexico. I live in Mexico now. So I moved here in 2024. So in Mexico.
Well, you live now in Mexico, right? Oh gosh.
That's
I
right.
really forgot.
Yeah. No, well, they're two Latin American countries. You're close. Yeah. They speak the same language.
It's the same for like Americans saying like, oh yeah, like Austria, Germany, it's the same. Like, like it's like two different countries, but they both are kind of similar in politics. They both kind of have the same language and all of those things. Like this, it's so far away. It's like Latin America, it's like the same language and stuff like that.
Exactly. But answering your question in the context of Mexico was, so my wife is Venezuelan, and of course, Venezuelan have experienced crazy inflation and very poor management of a country, and they've seen the worst of it. And hopefully they're going to overcome it soon. But I've lived in Latin American countries before. We speak Spanish at home. My daughter's bilingual in Spanish and English, and actually a few other languages too. But um, when we chose to move here for a range of reasons, proximity to some of my wife's family and the opportunity I had here. But, in general, speaking of opportunity, we just saw Mexico. It's this very large country, 130 million people. It's a growing economy, a younger economy. I've been living in Barcelona for 9 years, and I've heard you refer to these things about your life in Europe as well. But like, living in Europe can be awesome. The quality of life is great, but what I don't like about Europe, if I had to pinpoint one thing, it's like it feels like it's kind of stuck in the past. And, they like to preserve the architecture, which is gorgeous, the history, understandable. Like our society over globally tends to undervalue history and cultural artifacts and everything. So I like that about Europe, but what I don't like is there tends to be a conformity, a complacency around the status quo. Like, hey, we've already got good transit, we've already got beautiful architecture, we've got these great historical monuments. We don't really need to do any major change. And what I like about countries like Mexico is like they still need to do so much transformation of their infrastructure, of their economy and everything else. And so, they're looking at what Singapore is doing, at what Shanghai is doing, Dubai, and say, what can we do here? And you don't hear that kind of mindset in Europe in most markets. So I was kind of wanting to be around a country that is trying to transform itself where my expertise and passion could add value to society in a meaningful way and make a difference. And I got a job at a top university in Mexico, and I took that a year and a half ago. And as I said, when I moved here, I got deeper and deeper down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and couldn't let go of it. All your listeners know exactly how that feels. I think all of us are on the spectrum, as we say, the autism spectrum somewhere. So I wrote the book on Bitcoin. I started injecting Bitcoin content into the classrooms. I promised to myself by the end of this year, I would be working full time in Bitcoin. And I've managed that because I've started full time in July. I took the role of chief strategy officer for a company that's now called Arcadia B. It's the longest running Bitcoin services company in Mexico. So we have a brokerage business. We have Bitcoin-backed lending program, which is growing quite fast. We built our own Bitcoin custody solution in-house. We're launching a DCA service so people can dollar cost average on a regular basis as a savings account. We have a credit card, which will soon have a Bitcoin cashback component to it. We're about to release that. So we have all these services, and my job is to scale the underlying business through transforming our UX UI, through strategic initiatives, partnerships, scaling in maybe different Latin American markets, and introducing and launching Bitcoin Treasury. So we are Mexico's first Bitcoin Treasury company. We have 16 Bitcoin in our treasury right now. We're private, and we're on the path to public listing right now. So it's an ambitious company, the longest running Bitcoin services company in Mexico and the first Bitcoin treasury company in Mexico. And the synergy between the two is something that I'm very excited about.
That's super interesting. Maybe let's quickly go into this. Like, how do you feel like is the current state of treasury companies, and how do you kind of see the space of like investing in those strategies or like strategies in those treasury companies, so like strategy and other companies like that?
It's not a great market right now. If you're looking at it from stock performance, from the classical metric MNAV, multiple of net asset value, it's not good if you're on Bitcoin Twitter. It's a lot of FUD around the treasury companies. So in that regard, you could argue it's a bad time to do it, but that's not how we see it. We actually, I've been around the world a while and the economy's a while. And I actually think when you're in a frothy market trying to release something like this, it's actually problematic Because then you get these, for example, in the case of treasury companies, we had these wild MNAVs that got up to 8 or 10 MNAV, the multiple of net asset value, and that's just not sustainable. What happens when you do an IPO, when you release your shares in a moment when the market is really frothy, is like you're releasing it at the very, it's kind of like buying Bitcoin at the super top of a bull run. It's going to go down. The problem is, well, what happens when Bitcoin goes down? Well, the new people who aren't convicted, they get out quick and they may never come back. The people who've been in a while, some of them start spreading FUD, some of them rotate into AI because they lose their conviction over time. All these things happen. But if you do this in something like initiate a public offering when the market is bearish, you're not going to have crazy multiples. You're not going to have this crazy euphoria, which means when the market improves, you can show gradual quality progress towards your goals in terms of Bitcoin yield and all these other metrics that I think matter maybe more than MNAV. So in a nutshell, it's probably a great time to invest in quality treasury companies, probably because it feels like we're kind of at a very low point where a lot of them are trading under 1 MNAV, which is kind of crazy, right? Their net asset value is Bitcoin and they're trading less than their value of their Bitcoin, which is basically meaning if they have an operating business, if they have extremely strong team, these things are not being valued at all in the company's public valuation. So my longer take, sort of like, this is how we view the world at Arcadia B anyway, is that like the low time preference is built into our business. And so we're not trying to get a quick win. We're not trying to get a quick, exit. We're building for the long haul. I think our evidence is we've been running this company for 8 years now. I wasn't, but the founders have, and now I've joined. So they've been doing this for 8 years already. And we are ready to keep building and doing this for a long time more. And so if you take a zoom out, as we always say in the Bitcoin world, not just about the price of Bitcoin, but zoom out around treasury companies and say, where is the world going? And if we go back to the sustainable abundance triad we talked about, and we agree collectively that the world is basically going to converge around these 3 topics, maybe more, but these 3 are critical: AI, Bitcoin, and longevity. Okay. If Bitcoin has to become increasingly cross the chasm, as we talked about earlier, and the world's going to become hyper Bitcoinized, then by default, companies that have the most Bitcoin will be in the best position to succeed and thrive in the future economies. Well, those that are stacking now or sub $100,000 are in a way better position to have a lot more Bitcoin. And I think the future, and this kind of ties it all together in a way. So I refer to this thing, internally we refer to it as the Treasury Company 2.0. And in my opinion, the Treasury Company 2.0 is not yet what Michael Saylor is doing at Strategy, nor what Metaplanet is doing, but actually what we're doing at Arcadia B and what Jack Muller's plans to do at 21, which is integrating Bitcoin business models with a Bitcoin treasury company. Like very recently, I heard Jack Muller's in an interview where he literally said, we're not a treasury company, 21, we are a Bitcoin company. And that's how we see it. And the reason is you can create powerful synergies in a business that stacks Bitcoin and provides Bitcoin services to your customers, whether they're institutional customers or retail customers. And you can even leverage some of those tools that you have for your customers for your treasury business. So for example, we get the best rates at Arcadia B in all of Mexico for buying Bitcoin. Well, we're going to use that for ourselves. We've been doing it for customers for 8 years. Now we're doing it for ourselves when we stack Bitcoin. Oh, we built our own custody solution in-house to support our customers' needs. Well, we are already one of the only Bitcoin treasury companies in the world that actually custodies their own Bitcoin with their own custody technology. So we're eliminating that counterparty risk, and we're not putting it on Coinbase or anywhere else. It's held in our own multi-sig that we built ourselves. So the point being, there's all these powerful synergies. If we ever have a cash need to actually service a yield payment, one of the options we have on the table is deposit our own Bitcoin into our own Bitcoin lending program to generate fiat to service the yield payments we have to service with our own lending program. Or Metaplanet recently did this. Metaplanet went to the market to lock up Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin. Well, if we want to do that, we can do it ourselves because we buy the Bitcoin. We do Bitcoin-backed lending ourselves. So my point is there's so many powerful synergies, and a lot of people have been talking about this for a while in the treasury space, that maybe the future of Bitcoin treasury companies will be the next versions of Bitcoin banks. I think we already are a bank, even though we can't call ourselves that. Like, what do people think a bank does, right? Like in terms of like the average retail person, what do they think? What do they use their bank for? They store their money there. So it's custody. They sometimes get loans from their bank. They, do things, credit cards from their bank. We do this already at Arcadia Bay in Mexico. So I think the future 2.0 Bitcoin treasury company is one that integrates Bitcoin into their underlying business model, and that their operating business is not some restaurant chain or I don't care, whatever. Their underlying business should also be in the Bitcoin space. And then they have powerful synergies, and some will be like us who are doing it from the beginning. Some will eventually evolve to that.
I think it's a very good take, and I'm just getting educated on the whole space. One major takeaway I had so far is I always like to bring it down. The first principles thinking is, if Bitcoin is global money, if Bitcoin is what we think it is, and I do think we will get there, it's only logical that the biggest company on planet Earth will be the company that has the most Bitcoin. And I have a hard time believing any company can outrun strategy for the next 50 years. And so if you think about that, there's a good chance, I'm not saying it will happen, just saying there's a good chance that strategy might be the biggest company on Earth one day. And what is the biggest company on Earth right now? NVIDIA. And they are 82 times currently bigger than strategy. That's an upside. It's interesting to look at that. I think first you should stack Bitcoin in self-custody. I think the biggest stack should always be in self-custody. I do that currently with not even 2% of my net worth. So it's like very small position. It's just a starting position to dabble around, to learn. It could be that I'm selling it again because I might discover that it's not mine. So I'm literally in the first steps of actually researching it. The same as I did it with Bitcoin in 2020. When I first bought Bitcoin, I still thought it might be a scam. I still thought it might be not good, but I wanted to dabble into the actual thing. I wanted to buy in before I understood it, just with a small portion, just so I can judge if it's good or not. And I think it's better to do that with a little bit skin in the game. It's just like how I work. And so it finally happened. I finally did it, and I'm looking forward to the journey. And you guys probably can judge in the next couple of weeks how I get educated on that topic, and if I get more bullish or maybe more bearish on strategy and all other treasury companies.
So I agree with your conclusion. And I'll take it a step further, and this is probably self-serving, but I wrote about this in my book, Bitcoin Singularity, before I was even building something in this space, because I think it was the first book that ever had a chapter about treasury companies in the book. I believe very strongly, and this is a thesis that Nakamoto has articulated as well, David Bailey, which is that every country. So what I wrote in my book was every country with a money printer is going to be subject to a speculative attack on fiat via a treasury company. Now, since the book, I've refined my thesis around that after going deeper in the space. And I basically think that any country roughly in the top 50 economies that has their own money printer will be subject to a successful attack on fiat. And so where that goes is that basically you said the company with the most Bitcoin will eventually be worth the most money in the world. And I agree with that thesis. And so I'm extending it to say the same thing applies to the largest in every country. So if Arcadia B has the most Bitcoin in Mexico, we will eventually be the highest valued company in Mexico. I don't really think there's an alternative to that. I really don't. Like if Bitcoin has no top because fiat has no bottom, it's just logical that eventually that's where this goes. So I think it's about like emerging as a leading player in a major country that has a money printer. There's an area of the world that you live in that I'm a little uncertain around how the thesis plays out, and I'll explain why. So I believe this to be very true in Mexico. We're top 15 GDP in the world, so we clearly are in that top 50 space. Obviously, Strategy is in the number one economy, and they're the number one in the world holder of Bitcoin as a corporate. What I'm not clear about is if my thesis applies as well in Europe in the same way. And that's because you have a common currency and one central bank. So could you have a successful speculative attack on fiat in every country in Europe? Yes. Will the company in every country in Europe that has more Bitcoin follow exactly the same thesis in terms of how big they get to be? I don't know, because they can't extract as much of the value out of the fiat machine, out of the trapped capital in a market, because they're diluted across dozens of countries that all have one common central bank and one common money printer. But at least one in Europe, if not a dozen in Europe, are going to, have crazy success doing this.
I love that. And there already is one in France. There's one in Germany. So the whole game theory,
The
and there's
Netherlands.
probably the Netherlands, and so there's already a race. But there could be a winner takes all in Europe. Let's see who's gonna do that. But it's really fun to see that, because they potentially they do what we all want: stack as much Bitcoin as possible, so as many Bitcoin as possible. So that's really cool. We have one question for each, for every returning guest on the podcast, and you're a returning guest today, the second time on the show. And the question is, what have you learned outside of Bitcoin since your last appearance on the podcast?
So this might sound redundant from something we talked about already, but I think I've gotten deeper in longevity, and that's partially what allowed me to add. So I was already pretty deep in exponential technologies, especially AI and Bitcoin. I've been teaching around exponential technologies for years now. I wrote a book called Abundance Capitalism that looked at how exponential technologies converge to accelerate a path towards sustainable abundance. So I was already on that path. So like if you look at the sustainable abundance triad, it's kind of like I had two of these kind of fairly well covered from my own intellectual research and studies and experiences. But the longevity piece was a newer one for me. And it's been one that was probably originally triggered, well before our last pod, which was when I lost my brother to cancer. But it's been this like cumulative inquiry from me around how exponential technologies will actually benefit our health. And I started getting more and more into longevity, as I said, with Peter Diamandis, and even more recently with things Jordi Visser's been articulating around all this. And I'm very bullish on where this intersection is going, and excited for the same reason you are about its ability to extend people's quality of life on planet Earth more than how many years it adds to your life. So that's probably the thing I've gotten much deeper on in the last is since we met last. And one just like a second one just for fun is have had a very antagonistic view of electric mountain bikes, because I've been a diehard mountain biker for almost 30 years, and I'm 55, and I had told myself that when I'm 60 I would give into the electric motor mountain bike trend. And my partner at Arcadia B, who's a lot younger than me, is a diehard mountain biker too, but he used an electric. And when we ride together, I was riding on a normal pedal bike only, and he was riding on a assisted bike, and it was hard for me to keep up. And eventually I got sucked into realizing, he articulated one day to me that it was I need to start thinking about it as a separate sport. It's not the same sport because you can do more things. You can do different things. You can go longer, go farther. And it's not that you're being lazy if you have an electric. And it finally sunk in. And so I bought the bullet. I used our own Bitcoin backed lending program at Arcadia B. I put some Bitcoin in because I'm always fiat poor, deposited some Bitcoin, got my fiat loan, bought it on a new electric mountain bike, and I'm loving it. So I overcame a mental roadblock I had.
That's great to hear. I love using electric mountain bikes because you tend to actually have a longer duration of lower intensity workout. And if you think about health, this is actually really good for your heart. Like being in this zone 2 of cardio for like 1.5, 2 hours, it's just really cool. And if you also need high intensity, but you don't need that much. So a lot of like runners, a lot of like those sprinters, they do it like 5 times a week, and it's actually very stressful for your heart and can actually be harmful for you long term. And so having low intensity workouts, like in the zone 2 of your heart rate, that's probably really good. Like no medical advice, but like from what I understand, from what I research, having like once a week, like high intensity workout, like 30 minutes going all out, making a break, all out, making break, all out, making a break, and all out. Like it's horrible. Like I really hate it, but I do it once a week. And then like other cardios is just like zone 2, riding a bike, running, incline walking, all of those things. It's really fun. Also, even like incline backwards walking, like people do that. Like that's fucking awesome for your for your knees, and the knees get weak over time, and so I like to doing that. So that's just my small medical thing for today.
Thanks for validating that I'm being consistent with my abundance triad and longevity. So it's like I feel even better about biting the bullet and going electric.
Yeah, it's good. It's 2 different sports. Yeah. Like, if you do it every single day, I mean, you're going to do the same zone 2 kind of thing for the non-electrical bike. It's just a lot harder, especially like maybe I'm biased for Austria because we have a lot of mountains. So you tend to go up a mountain for like 10 minutes and you're like, oh, fucking zone 4, zone 5 of the heart rate. Then you go down, you fall to zone 1. And so you basically have this high intensity workout inbuilt, and doing that too much, can actually put a strain on your heart. But anyways, thank you so much, Boyd, we have the end routine. I almost forgot. We have the end routine on the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, should you take fiat debt to buy Bitcoin? I mean, you already answered the question, I guess, right before when you said how you acquired the bike.
Absolutely. I know it's controversial in the Bitcoin world to some people, but I'm a huge fan of it. I've done it 3 times now. I mean, if we accept first principles that Bitcoin is sound money, you want as much sound money as you can. You spend crappy money and you keep sound money. Like that's the way, that's Gresham's law. That's how you should live the most economically efficient lifestyle, right? Well, if that's the case, then you should optimize as much fiat you have and put it into Bitcoin whenever you can. But that means you don't have a lot of fiat sitting around. So, I'm taking my family to Barcelona and Dubai over the holidays, and I didn't have all that money in fiat. I had it in my Bitcoin savings. So I took out a loan and covered the cost of the travel that way. And when I bought my bike, I did the same thing. I have no fear of doing that because I have so much conviction around Bitcoin. And when you're taking out a loan on fiat that is going to devalue, in the case of Mexico, the M2 growth is 10% a year. It's like, the fiat denominated debt is going to reduce in actual real terms over the time duration of the loan anyway. And over a year, you never know what's going to happen with Bitcoin. It could go up or down, but like the last thing I want to do is sell my Bitcoin. I'm happy to spend my Bitcoin. I do spend and replace, and I'm happy to use it for getting fiat loans. I think it's a no-brainer.
I think so too. I rather spend them actually, but because like for emotional reasons, like I cannot do it right now. But I also said similar things about strategy, so maybe I'll change my mind also on taking borrowing against the Bitcoin. Let's see how it develops. I'm definitely open towards it. Thank you so much, Boyd, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you and follow your great work?
Thanks. I think the easiest way is on Twitter at Boyd Cohen. And then, of course, our company is arcadiab.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Boyd, for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.